Just a little 2-chapter book toward the end of the Old Testament. Little book, little message. I'll try anyway. Left my watch at home today, so I'm surprised I didn't have 3 or 4 people running up here to let me borrow a watch. This is a power-packed little book right here. And before we read, I want to just give you some background. I'm going to try to do a quick overview and then get right into the message of where we're going to settle in and look at this morning. But the background is this, that for 70 years, God's people, Israel, were exiled from the land of promise. They were taken out of the land, scattered all over the earth, and primarily in an area called Babylon. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar with Babylon was the one who came in and besieged Jerusalem and took them out of the holy city and carried them away captive. And basically the Babylonian mentality was any nation that they conquer, they just assimilate that nation into their own culture, into their own people. And so just a very small group of people were left under kind of a puppet administration under Nebuchadnezzar, and they were so here's God's people, and they're exiled from the land and begin assimilating into the culture and everything like that. You know, there was a few standouts, and I literally mean standouts, like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were their biblical names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And then Babylon is overtaken by the Medo-Persian Empire, which later would drop the Medo part and just become the Persian Empire. And so now, 70 years later, they're under the Persian Empire. And just like God said he would all the way back before captivity in Isaiah, God raised up a man over the Persian Empire who had compassion over God's people and allowed them to go back to their land and reestablish themselves in the land that God gave them. Now, I got to be honest, until I was studying to preach out of Haggai, I don't know that I'd ever fully considered the implications of what I just said until I started thinking back through history. And I love history. I love reading about history. Some people say, "Preacher, do you get scared when you see what's going on around us?" And the answer is, I can't say that I get scared, because I know how everything ends. I know where it's going. But what unsettles me the most is, as a student of history, when I see things repeating themselves, and you knew how they went last time and you know how they're going to go this time, that's unsettling. But I also know that God's in control and he's in charge, and that is the hope. That is the hope of a relationship with God. But as I look back over history, I just started thinking from this perspective. How many nations in history, after being conquered and removed from their land, were ever allowed to go back, reclaim the land, set up their own government, be their own sovereign nation again, just like they were before being overtaken and carried off into captivity and everything like that? Friends, that can only be God. That is an anomaly in human history. Because usually what happens is, when a people get conquered, they are conquered. They're done. They become something else, or there's a transition, but they never get their land back, and they don't go back to what they were before. That just doesn't happen. Even in certain isolated incidents of history where you've seen resurgencies of old people groups or nations or something like that, it's never exactly what it was before, but in this case, it was. Same nation, same family of people, same land, same government system, same religious system. Everything just jump-started and reinstated back the same way. That can only be for one reason. God made a promise, and He always fulfills His promises. So after 70 years of captivity, they're allowed to come back home. And God asks them to do one thing with this first wave of people that are going to go home. He asks them to do one thing. When you get back, you're going to find in Jerusalem that everything's been wiped out. There's nothing there. The city was laid waste. And it sat in a wasteland condition for 70 years. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back and I want you to build my house. I want you to rebuild the temple. There was a man named Zerubbabel that God appointed the head of this project from a governmental standpoint. And another man named Joshua, and this is not the same Joshua that defeated Jericho. This is a different Joshua. But another man named Joshua who would act as the religious leader. He would be the priest going back, and under these two men's leadership, they were to build a house for God. And so the people got back into the land, and they were excited. They were excited to be back. They were excited for God's grace. They were excited what God had done in their life, and they got right to work. And in very little time at all, they had laid the foundation for the new house of God, the new temple. And one day they stood back and they took a look at the foundation that they had laid out for the temple of God. And there were some in that number who had actually seen the first temple, had been in captivity for 70 years, and got to come back. So we're talking about some older people now, but they had seen the first temple of God, and now they look at the foundation and they're disappointed. And the reason that they're disappointed is because the foundation that they had laid, just the square footage of the foundation they had laid for the new house of God, was nothing compared to the temple that had been there before. Look, the temple that was there before had materials that were laid by David for years at the end of his life. And then it was built by Solomon, who had anything at his disposal. He had Hiram as a project manager. He had lumber coming out of the cedars of Lebanon. He had ships. He had boats that were hauling stuff around. I mean, it was a magnificent temple to the house of God. But guess what? That temple's gone now. They lay the foundation based upon what is their capability and the resources that they have. And some of them stood back and took a look at it and said, this is nothing compared to what it was. And they got discouraged. And so what happened was, out of discouragement and something else that we're going to point out in just a second, they stopped building the temple after only laying the foundation. So all that's there on the temple site is the foundation, and they stopped laying the temple. Now here's a couple things that would be understandable, and I believe God would understand these things too. People come back from captivity and move into an area that has been basically a wasteland. It's kind of going to be necessary for these people to have houses to live in that they can go home to every day. They're going to need some shelter and stuff like that. I understand that. I believe God understands that. They're going to need some food, which means they're going to have to take a little bit of time to break up some ground that hadn't been broken up in quite some time and plant some seeds and grow some crops, and they're going to have to feed themselves and sustain themselves. I get that. I believe that God understands that. So when we're talking about come back home and build my temple, it's not like God in this dictatorial format is saying, you do nothing when you get back to the land until my house is built. I don't believe that's God's edict at all that he gives to the people, because they do have some necessities. In other words, some time is going to have to be dedicated to just living in the land again while they are building the house of God. Everybody with me here? But what happened was they left off building the house of God, and now by the time God speaks to Haggai to speak to the people, 18 years have passed. All right, I understand a little bit of time to get settled in and get a roof over your head and get some crops in the ground. I understand that. 18 years have passed, and every day as people come and go and do what they're doing for 18 years, they're walking by a foundation that is just sitting there and there's no work going on. So you and I can understand, 18 years means 18 times they've sown crops and harvested crops. Oh, and their houses, by the way, some of you might say, well, preacher, you don't know. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe resources were really hard to come by. And I'm sure they weren't the easiest to come by. But this is one thing that God does point out, that they didn't just live in houses after 18 years. Haggai said that they lived in sealed houses. Seiled. In other words, oh, okay, isn't that like a house with a roof on it? Well, yes, all houses do better with roofs. It's kind of what makes them shelter. But sealed has more of an idea than just a roof. As a matter of fact, one definition in the Strong's of this word is wainscot. And what it's basically saying is, the idea of this word is, it wasn't just a roof over their head, it was ornate. It was garnished. It was decorated. It wasn't just a house, a place to live. It was a nice house. So here's what God's saying here. That for 18 years, while my house lieth waste and there's nothing going on there, you're building really nice houses for you to live in, and you're planting crops, and you're doing all this stuff. As a matter of fact, here's where we can start reading. In verse number 1, he says, in the 2nd year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the 1st day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua the son of Josedech, the high priest, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, This people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. There's at least 4 times in these 2 chapters of the book of Haggai that God has to say to these people, consider your ways. Think about what you're doing. Consider your ways. Then he says in verse 6, Ye have sown much, and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. That's a bad day right there. Anybody ever had a hole in your pocket and you didn't know it? And your whole life savings is going right down your pant leg. Somebody's picking it up on the sidewalk. You're getting wages, but you're putting them into a bag with holes. You're carrying your purse around, and stuff's leaking out, and you don't even know. So you get to the store, and you go to pull out your money to buy something that you're just sure is there, and it's not. He says, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Go up to the mountain and bring wood, and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. Ye looked for much, and lo, it came to little, and when ye brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because of mine house that is waste, and ye run every man unto his own house. Therefore the heaven over you is stayed from dew, and the earth is stayed from her fruit. And I called for a drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the corn, and upon the new wine, and upon the oil, and upon that which the ground bringeth forth, and upon men, and upon cattle, and upon all the labor of the hands. So what he's saying is, for 18 years, you've worked really hard and barely gotten by. It's not been a lack of work effort here, but because your focus has been so off, all of your labor and all of your work effort has not produced what you wanted, what you desired, what you expected. Now, if you want to get to the real point of the book of Haggai, it is this simple. Selfishness does not, cannot, will not ever satisfy. When you live for yourself, you will, mark it down, you will never be satisfied. You will never get the end result that you want. You can put in as much effort as you want, but if it is all for self, it will not amount to what you think it's going to add up to. You can say, look, I know there's people around me, and I know that everybody's got needs, and I know that God's got some commands, and I know all of that, but hey, this life is about me, and I'm going to do for me and mine, and I'm going to go out here, and I'm going to accomplish what I'm going to accomplish for myself, and what I'm going to tell you is, you're going to live a very, very frustrated life. Right. And there's a lot of people in that place right now. I'm telling you, we live in a frustrated society today because nobody thinks that life is giving them what they deserve, and the reason is because selfishness never, ever satisfies. It won't do it. Watch what he says here. You can see it. It comes right off the page in what God says here. Through Haggai, he says in verse number 6, watch where the focus is here. See if there's any kind of wording that just keeps being repeated over and over again. Ye have sown much and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. Did you hear the emphasis of what God's saying right there? It's all about you, you, you. Ye is the plural form of you in our King James Bible. That's all that is. It is all about you, you, you. And as long as your focus is on you, you will never get what you think you're going to. Because life doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Well, somebody says, well, it should work like that. It should be that, or at least I've been told in every Disney movie I've ever watched, that I have a dream, and then I work real hard, and I see my dream fulfilled. And then comes the happily ever after. Well, I don't mean to bust anybody's bubble here, but and I really don't mean to overtake anybody's magic kingdom. But that's a fantasy world. If you can dream it, you can do it. Walt Disney's direct quote, known for saying it. If you can dream it, you can do it. But here's the problem with that. It's not true. I have always dreamed of dunking a basketball. And I have never been able to do it. And will not be able to do it. So my new dream is become a basketball. That's what I'm working on right now. You understand what I'm saying? The world loves to say, hey, just figure out what you want out of life and then go get it. And don't let anybody tell you different. Well, nobody has to tell you different because reality is screaming it the whole time. Reality is screaming. That's not how this works. Because what that does is that leaves God completely out of the picture. And that's what the world really wants to do. Take God completely out of thought, take God completely out of ideas. Let's just remove God totally from the picture. But the problem is, without God, there is nothing worth having. Yeah, without God, there is no life. There's certainly no abundant life. Without God, we are certainly missing what life is all about. So he says, hey, for 18 years, I brought you back here. I reestablished you. And for 18 years, it's been about you. And then God is simplistic enough to just say this. Consider your ways. In other words, how's that going for you? How's that treating you? And I can just imagine that maybe some of them were kind of in this mentality like, well, you know, life's hard for everybody and we're just soldiering on. And some people almost, watch this, some people almost take some kind of glory or pride in the fact that life is an uphill struggle, even when it doesn't have to be. Like there's some kind of pride or badge of honor in the fact that, man, this if they said what was true, it would come out like this. You know what? It's hard to get through life with God resisting you all the time, but we're making it. Now, hang on just a second. That is what the Bible says. God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. And I found out a long time ago, life is easier with grace. Life is much easier with the grace of God. And it is much harder when God has to stiff-arm you. Well, that's difficult. And there's no badge of honor in it. We need to humble ourselves and say, hey, this isn't about me. There are bigger things going on that involve my life than just what's going on in my life. And I need to start looking outwardly. I need to start looking up first and then looking outwardly and see that God might have more for my life than just that next little sparkle that I'm reaching for. That next little favor that I'm trying to get. That next little satisfaction that about the time I've got it in my hand, it just turns into dust and it's gone. Because that's where he goes next. He says look in chapter 2. So God gets Zerubbabel and Joshua's attention, and he stirs up the spirit within them, and so they get after the people and say, hey, we've been selfish. We've not been doing this thing right. We got to get busy and build the house of God. So they came and they did the work in the house of the Lord of hosts, their God. That's how chapter 1 ends. Praise the Lord. Chapter 2, verse number 1, the 7th month and the 20th day of the month came the word of the Lord by the prophet Haggai, saying, speak now to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and to the residue of the people, saying, who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory, and how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of it as nothing? Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, saith the Lord, and be strong, O Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest, and be strong, all ye people of the land, saith the Lord, and work, for I am with you, saith the Lord of hosts, according to the word that I covenanted with you when you came out of Egypt, So my spirit remaineth among you, fear ye not. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, yet once, it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land, and I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations shall come, and I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than of the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. Now, I don't know if y'all remember this, but the reason that we're going through every book of the Bible is because I made the assertion over a year ago, you can see Jesus in every one of them, that he's there. And here's the thing, I'm not going to force him where he is not. I'm not going to say a verse is talking about him when it's not. But here's the information that Haggai just gave the people. He said, you're looking at square footage. You're looking at what is overlaid with gold. See, a lot of the temple in Solomon's temple was overlaid with gold, and man, you could just look around. There's silver, there's gold, there's bronze, there's all this kind of stuff. They did not have those kind of resources building this temple. But here's what God said. There is a future temple that will reveal more of my glory than what's been in the past. And it has nothing to do with square footage. And it has nothing to do with gold and silver and bronze and precious stones and metals and things like that. It has nothing to do with that. Because what Haggai is pointing forward to is that there would be one day when God would meet with his people in that temple. Are you listening? He would meet with his people in that temple, but it wouldn't be in the form of smoke on a mercy seat like it had been in the days of the Old Testament. What he's saying is, it's not just about the glory of the temple, but he said, in this place, the desire of all nations shall come. Now, if you'll stop and think with me just for a second, you've probably heard that expression before, even if you haven't read the Bible. The desire of all nations. It happens to be in my favorite verse of my favorite hymn in the songbook that says this: come, desire of nations, come. Fix in us thy humble home. Rise the woman's conquering seed, and bruise in us the serpent's head. I like this. Adam's likeness, now efface. Stamp thine image in its place. Second Adam from above, reinstate us in thy love. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to who? The newborn King. I'm not, for time's sake, I'm not going to go over there. I said I wasn't going to cry. I couldn't prepare this without crying, so I don't know if I can preach it without crying. When God made man, it is clear that he did it for this purpose: to have someone that would fellowship with him. It's evidenced by the fact that God came walking in the garden in the cool of the day. No word that I can say this morning can fully describe what mankind lost when sin entered the picture. God still came walking. Thank the Lord. But man was hiding. Hiding from the guilt of his own sin. Hiding from the shame of his own nakedness. And you and I know how sin gives the feeling of the reality of our separation from God. We know how the knowledge of our sin shows us that God is holy and we are not. And there is a gulf. There is a separation between us. And when God said, "Thou shalt surely die," that's exactly what he was talking about. And man chose to believe Satan's word over God's and found out the hard way that death is no joke. Separation from God is horrible. What it means is that every human born of Adam's race, which is all of us, has inherited his sin nature, which means we come into this world not perfect, but already flawed, already having a sin nature, and it's not too long before that sin nature is already manifesting itself in choices to sin. But understand this, it's not just our sinful choices that separate us from God. We sin because we are sinners and already dead in trespasses and sins, already separated from God. And here's what that means. Here's what that separation means. Every human being born on this earth who's ever lived, other than Jesus Christ, has began life and continued in life with something missing. I'm talking about a longing within. A longing for satisfaction. A longing that is a void that needs something to fill it up so that life has meaning, so that life has purpose, so that life has something moving in some kind of direction that could bring a semblance of joy or peace or something like that. And every human being knows that longing. They know that desire. I'm going to stick with that word. They know that desire and goes about to fill it. Most of the time, only knowing what our nature tells us will satisfy it. And so we listen to our nature, but remember, our nature is broken. Our nature is sinful. So this sinful nature that is within us is instructing us from within on how to satisfy that longing, how to fulfill that desire. But what it's telling us is it's about you. It's about you. You need this, and you need this, and you need this. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, that didn't work. Actually, that brought pain. That brought hurt. That brought heartache. Okay, regroup. Try this, try this, try this. And a human being going through life, listening to the sin nature on how to fill that void and satisfy that longing, is ever reaching for things that never really exist, trying to find satisfaction here and here and here and here, and nothing ever fills the void. Ever. Well, I'm going to tell you what, you need to be a successful person and your life will have meaning. Well, let me just ask you this. Why is it then that so many successful people are so dissatisfied? Yep. Money, money, money. More than they can spend, more than they can use, and they are disgusted with life. Why is that? Then the flesh comes along and says, well, I'll tell you what, how about this? You need to be in a relationship with somebody. Yep, that'll do it. Relationship with somebody, that'll bring purpose to your life. That'll bring meaning to your life and everything. And it would if the person that you were in a relationship with was perfect. But I married the only perfect one out there. So the rest of you are out of luck. She's smiling. Here's what I'm saying. If you get into a relationship, I don't care if it's boyfriend, girlfriend, I don't care if it's husband, wife, how far you take it. I'm just telling you, a relationship with another person will not fill the void that is in your life. Don't do it. You wonder why people turn to drugs? They're trying to fill a void. You wonder why people become alcoholics? They're trying to fill a void. Sex? Trying to fill a void. Entertainment? Trying to fill a void. Oh. Now it's getting a little heavy. Addiction to comedy? Now hang on just a second. There's some people that just go from video to video to video, trying to laugh again and laugh again and laugh again. And I'm telling you why, because there's something missing. Because there's something missing. They're just looking for that next little chuckle, that next little laugh, that next little, I've not seen that before. And here's what it is. If you want to know about it on a scientific level, it's called a dopamine response in the brain. And it's just a little bit more dopamine, a little bit more dopamine, a little bit more dopamine. That's why on Mars Hill in Acts chapter 19, they lived to hear or tell some new thing, little dopamine response, little new thing, little something to add to their life, and a little more to think about. Why? They're trying to fill a void. That's why Haggai says, don't worry about how small the building is. This building is not a true reflection of the desire of nations. And there will come a day that the desire of nations, the reason that he called it that is because this is not just about Israel. This is about all people of the earth, because we all have the same desire. And that desire is something that we were created to have. And that is fellowship with a true and living God. Yep. Amen. And he said the desire of nations is going to come. And he's going to bring glory into this temple like the former temple never had. Because here's what happened. The same God who came walking in the Garden of Eden with Adam, one day was carried into the temple in Jerusalem. And man, were there some people that were glad to see him. There were people that had lived 90 years waiting for this little baby to show up. And then when he's 12, this is the part that gets me, I'm sorry. He's 12. He comes walking into that temple as a 12-year-old boy. Are you getting this? The same God who came walking in the garden in the cool of the day and found separation between him and mankind came back and walked among men again, this time to bridge the gap of that separation and fill the desire and the longing of every empty heart and life. Amen. And if you read the Gospel of John, John seems to include him being in and out of that temple all the time. He's just walking in and out of that temple. He's walking in and out of that temple. He said, at one time he drives the money changers out. He says, you have no reason to be here. You've made my Father's house, which is a house of prayer, you've turned it into a den of thieves. Drives them out of there. You want to know why the glory of the latter temple was greater than the first? Because the first never had God walk into it. But he did, in the person of Jesus Christ, walk into the latter temple as the desire of nations that had come. They hated him. The religious leaders hated him and threatened people that if they believed in him, they would be kicked out of the synagogue. This wasn't in my preparation. I just want to say this real quick. Some of the greatest harm that's ever been done to people having relationship with God has been done not by the lost, sinful world out here, but by people who are religious, who claim to be the ones to teach people how to have relationship with God. Some of the greatest harm's been done by those people. Because religion doesn't give you a relationship with God. You don't need religion for a relationship with God. You need faith to have a relationship with God. And then you walk by faith in relationship with God after you trust him by faith. And the desire of nations had come. And they hung him on a cross. You say, that's horrible. I can't believe they did that. It was horrible. It was atrocious. But he knew it was going to happen. And that's actually why he came. So that it would happen. Because he knew that by his death, I'm talking about Jesus Christ, by his death and resurrection, the separation could be fulfilled. And by faith, anyone who calls upon Jesus Christ could know that void finally filled. So when Jesus was here, he said things like this. He said, I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. But I am come that they might have life, and they might have it more abundant. Amen. That's like void-filling kind of stuff there. At one point, they were asking him about living water, and he said, whoever believes in me, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water, that they never have to thirst again. What's he talking about? He's talking about the void that only he can fill. Only a fellowship with God could ever fill. If you want to know purpose and meaning for your life, let me tell you where you can find it. Walking in fellowship with God. You say, that is not what I desire. Well, sometimes we desire things we don't even know we desire them. Last week, I bought a contraption for my son. It's called a bounce back. And it's a frame with a springy net on it. You throw a baseball and it bounces it back to you. I bought one for them. Y'all know this, but he's about to debut in his baseball career. And so I wanted him to practice a little bit, so I bought him a bounce back. We were looking to put him with the St. Louis Cardinals, but he's going to have to start off with one of their farm teams, the Springfield Park Board, and go from there. But I wanted him to practice a little bit, so I got him one of these. And if you'll indulge me, I just want to tell you a little story. There was one particular Christmas that I had to get. I didn't always get what I asked for. Anybody else like that? Christmas? I don't always get what I asked for, but my parents tried. Sometimes it was out of reach, but they really did want to get us things that we liked. And so they would allow us to ask, and they would tell us, no, I don't know if I can get it, but we'll try. Well, there was this one year, it was something I really wanted. And I'd asked for it and then kind of left some hints about it here and there, dropped a little bit here and there. And I was just sure Christmas morning that's what I was going to get. And Christmas morning, that is not what I got. I got a bounce back. That's what I got. I got one of those things I just bought for Trey. And at first, I just thought, this is dumb. I don't want this. And the reason that I thought I didn't want it was because I thought something else would be better. But it's what I got, and I knew my parents, and I knew that if you complain about what you get as a gift, they will take it back to the store. And you won't get anything. That's how I was brought up. And so I was like, but it's something. And so I put it together, and I decided to play with it. And I played with it. And I played with it. And I don't mind telling you, probably the greatest Christmas gift I ever got. Because it allowed me to play sports, which I liked. And you say, well, you don't look very athletic. That's okay. Sports was way better than my only other option with 3 sisters in the home, which was house. And you're like, well, what was wrong with house? You get to be the man. Do you know my sister? I'm the dad, she's the mom. I'm going to tell you, that is a matriarchal run household right there. And I wasn't about to play with Barbies. And so this bounce back allowed me to live out my athletic dreams. I cannot tell you how many World Series I have pitched in the backyard of 1425 Nutwood Avenue in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Stand there, that thing, just throwing it, poof. Catcher always got it right back, boom, boom. Because every pitch was a strike. So the catcher's just getting it right. You just strike one out after another. I'm telling you, I ended up loving that thing so much that the net would break where it hooked to the springs. And I'd find a way to tie it back together and stretch it a little bit more, hook it back in those springs. The springs rusted, and I raided this fishing tackle box that my mom kept all of her sewing stuff in. And I took her elastic, and I made my own little springs so I could just keep playing with this thing. And what I'm just saying is, I never even knew it existed. I never would have known that would be such a big part of my childhood. And that I would have so many hours of fun with that thing. I didn't even know that. And at first I didn't even want it because I thought I wanted something else. Y'all with me on this? There might be somebody in here this morning and you don't think you want what I'm telling you about here. Because you still got it in your mind. Maybe this will satisfy. Maybe this will fill the longing. Maybe this will give meaning and purpose. But what I'm telling you is, there's no one that Jesus Christ has ever let down. And anyone who's ever trusted in him has found a friend who is closer than a brother. They found someone that they can share life with, that they can walk with, that they can fellowship with. And when times are down, he's always going to be there. And when times are great, there's somebody to share in the glory with. And I'm just telling you, he is a faithful friend. You might not realize it right now, but he is what your soul desires. He is. And he has come. And he came for you. Died for you on a cross, rose again. And if you'll call upon him today, he can satisfy your longings. And he will. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for your word.